My name is Catherine, and before I share what happened that night, let me tell you something that will make you want to hear every word of this story. My son walked into the kitchen that evening and said something that brought back feelings I'd buried for years. What he said didn't just change how I saw him, it changed how I saw myself. Stay with me, because you won't see where this goes. And before I begin, tell me this. What part of the country are you calling home tonight? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know, because this story might resonate with you no matter where you're sitting right now. That particular evening began like dozens before it. Twilight had settled over the neighborhood, washing everything in soft purples and grays. My kitchen table had become my usual spot, a place where I'd sit with a cup of tea that always went cold before I finished it. I held the mug more for its warmth than anything else. The house felt too empty. My husband had been gone for 5 years, and while I'd adjusted to the quiet, there were still moments when the silence felt like a weight on my chest. My son Thomas was 28. He lived upstairs in what used to be the guest room. We shared the same space but lived separate lives. He had his job, his friends, his world. I had my routines, my books, my memories. We existed in parallel, rarely intersecting beyond quick hellos and mundane questions about dinner plans. That evening, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps that didn't have their usual hurried quality. When Thomas appeared in the doorway, I glanced up, surprised to see him without his usual headphones or phone in hand. He looked at me in a way he hadn't in years. Like he was actually seeing me, not just looking past me toward the refrigerator or the door. "Mom," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" My heart jumped. Those 4 words carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. "Of course," I managed, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, leaning forward with his hands clasped together. We sat there in a silence that felt alive, humming with things unsaid. I studied his face in the dim kitchen light. He'd grown into such a man. Strong features, dark eyes, the set of his jaw when he was thinking through something difficult. I saw echoes of his father in the way he tilted his head, the way his brow furrowed slightly. "I've been thinking," he started, then stopped. He tried again. "I've been thinking about you. About how you're here every night and I'm just upstairs and we barely—" He trailed off. "Barely what?" I prompted gently. "Barely know each other anymore," he finished. "And tonight I couldn't stay up there. I needed to come down here. I needed to tell you something." I set my teacup down, afraid I might drop it. My son, who'd grown so distant over the years, was opening a door I'd assumed was permanently closed. "What is it?" I asked. He looked directly at me, his eyes clear. "I realized something today. You've been here, always here, solid as a rock. And I've been taking that for granted. Taking you for granted. I don't want to do that anymore." Something cracked open inside me. Tears formed before I could stop them. For years I'd carried this quiet ache, watching my son drift into adulthood while I remained tethered to the past. I'd never wanted to burden him with my loneliness. So I'd smiled when he came home late, told him I was fine when he asked in passing, waved him off when he rushed out the door, but here he was, speaking words I'd only imagined hearing. "Thomas," I said, my voice breaking on his name. "You have no idea how much that means to me." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand. That's why I'm here." The conversation opened up after that, flowing in ways it hadn't in years. He asked about my day, really asked, with follow-up questions and genuine interest. I told him about the book I was reading, about small frustrations I'd been dealing with, about memories that surfaced when the house got too quiet. He listened. Actually listened, his attention never wavering. And then he said something that made time stop. "Mom, I want you to know I'm proud of you. For everything you've done, everything you've held together. I see it now, even if I didn't before." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. My son, who rarely expressed emotion so directly, had just given me the one thing I'd been longing to hear. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means everything." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I should have said it years ago. The fluorescent light above us flickered slightly, and for a moment, the whole kitchen felt wrapped in warmth. I realized then that the most profound moments don't come with grand gestures. They come with simple presence. My son could have stayed upstairs. Instead, he chose to sit with me, and in doing so, he gave me back a piece of myself I thought was lost. The quiet between us had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt like a bridge, solid and real, connecting his chair to mine. Thomas rubbed his palms together like he was gathering courage. "There's something else," he said. "Something I want to show you if you're okay with it." "What is it?" He gestured toward the hallway closet. "Last week, when I was looking for the toolbox, I found something. A small suitcase with Dad's handwriting on the tag. I didn't want to open it without you." My breath caught. That closet had been there since before Thomas was born. I'd avoided going through its deeper shelves after my husband passed. Not because there was anything dangerous, but because ordinary objects have the sharpest edges. A worn jacket, a pair of reading glasses, small things that knew how to cut. The idea that something remained undiscovered felt impossible. And then it felt like hope. "If you want to," I said carefully, "we can look at it together." Thomas stood and walked to the hallway. I heard the closet door creak open, heard him shifting things around. He returned carrying a small weathered suitcase, the kind people used to take on weekend trips. On the handle was a luggage tag with my husband's neat handwriting. "For a quiet evening. There was rain earlier," Thomas said, almost smiling. "Seemed like the right time." "Close enough," I agreed. He set the suitcase on the table and sat down beside me this time, not across from me anymore, but right there, our shoulders almost touching. He looked at me like he was asking permission. I nodded. Inside, everything reflected my husband's character. Organized, thoughtful, purposeful. There was a folded handkerchief from our favorite restaurant, a strip of old photo booth pictures where we were too young to care about looking perfect, a small tin containing odds and ends he'd saved just in case, and a velvet pouch with a familiar weight. I opened the pouch and a simple silver bracelet slid into my palm. The first piece of jewelry he'd ever given me, years before we could afford anything elaborate. I'd lost it at a picnic once and cried for days. He must have found it and kept it safe. No fanfare, no mention, just quiet preservation. Beneath these items lay an envelope with both our names written across it. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. Thomas placed his finger under the flap and hesitated. "Only if you're ready," he said. "We don't have to do this tonight." I met his eyes. "I want to." He opened the envelope and handed me the letter. The first line brought my husband's presence into the room, clear and immediate, the way certain music can transport you instantly to another time and place. "If you're reading this, it means time has done what time always does. I hope it's been gentle with you both." I read aloud until my voice wavered, then passed it to Thomas. He continued, his breath catching on certain words. "Take care of the small things," it said. The squeaky hinges, the loose doorknobs. They're excuses to work side by side. And when the house feels too large, put on music and move together in the kitchen. Hold each other. It's not the dancing that matters. It's the holding. By the end, we sat in that heavy, grateful silence that grief sometimes becomes when it's finished, surprising you and has settled into something you can live with. Thomas folded the letter along its creases and laid it gently on the table. He cleared his throat. "Mom, that's the other thing I wanted to say." He looked around the kitchen, taking it all in. The mismatched chairs, the bulletin board covered with old photos and shopping lists, the spot on the floor where the tile had chipped. "I don't want this house to feel too big for you. Not anymore." "You already help," I started, but he shook his head. "No, I mean really help. Be present. Learn what Dad knew. I never asked him enough questions, and I can't let another year pass wishing I had." He took a breath. "Would you teach me how you keep this place running? How you made it a home? Dad taught me about changing tires and checking oil, but you were the one who kept everything else together. Could you show me?" I looked at my son, this grown man with his father's steadiness and his own earnestness, and felt something fierce and tender rise in me. "Yes," I said. "If you'll teach me about your world, show me the technology you understand, the apps and devices that baffle me. We'll trade knowledge. You show me your streaming services and how to video call properly, and I'll show you where I keep the good scissors and how to get stains out of anything." He smiled, and it landed somewhere warm in my chest. "Deal." He looked toward the sink, where I'd been meaning to fix the dripping tap for weeks. "We could start now if you want. With that." That's how we ended up side by side at the kitchen sink, the house old and trusting around us. He crouched down to check under the cabinet while I handed him tools, the good wrench that fit my hand like an old friend. Our hands bumped, And instead of the quick apology he would have muttered last year, he looked up and grinned. "Lefty Lucy," I said. He snorted. "Mom, I'm 28. Humor me." He turned the valve, and water dripped in a rhythm we could measure. Then slow, then stop. We talked while we worked. The kind of conversation that happens when nobody's watching the clock. He asked about the first time we'd renovated the bathroom. I asked what it felt like for him during those first weeks after his father's funeral. He told me about a moment when he'd almost called me from work because a song on the radio reminded him of Dad. But he didn't because he thought it would make me sad. "I'd rather be sad together than brave and isolated in separate rooms," I told him. We replaced the washer, tightened everything back, turned the handle, and the drip surrendered. He sat back on his heels like someone who'd won a small but meaningful victory and bumped my shoulder with his. I bumped him back. "One small thing fixed," he said, standing. "How many more are there?" The house felt earned. I don't know how else to describe it. Some places you merely occupy. Others you keep alive together. The kitchen called us back with its soft light and its table full of treasures. Thomas's eyes went to the old radio on the counter. One we kept because it still worked, and because its static felt honest. He turned it on and found a station playing the kind of music my husband used to hum while cooking Sunday dinners. The kitchen filled with melody that didn't demand attention but earned it anyway. Something loosened in my chest. Thomas looked at me then, careful but certain. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he held out his hand, simply offering. "Would you dance with me?" Like the letter said, "Only if you want to." Of all the things I thought might happen that evening, dancing in my kitchen with my grown son wasn't on the list. That's what made it unexpected. That's what made it perfect. I put my hand in his and he waited for me to come the rest of the way. We stood on the worn linoleum, years of meals and conversations and ordinary life compressed beneath our feet. He placed one hand, respectful and warm, between my shoulder blades the way his father used to. I rested mine on his arm. We didn't talk. We just moved in small steps, the kind that don't require skill, only attention. I closed my eyes and felt the careful pressure of his hand, the clean scent of laundry detergent, the soft insistence of the melody. I remembered the first time he'd stood on my feet to dance, how his giggling had shaken my whole body. This time his steps were steady. He was steady. We swayed through one song and then another. At one point, Thomas leaned closer. "I forget to slow down," he admitted. "It feels like if I stop moving, I'll miss something. But I think I've been missing this." "We both have," I said. When the song ended, he turned off the radio and let the silence be music too. We sat back at the table, and before the moment could slip away, he spoke again. "I've been thinking about getting my own place," he said, and my throat tightened. He must have seen it on my face because he quickly continued. "Not right away, not soon. I started thinking I was supposed to because that's what people my age do. But I'm not sure that's what either of us needs right now. If you're okay with it, I'd like to stay for a while. Not to avoid life, but to build something here with you before I go make my own life elsewhere." I hadn't realized I'd been bracing myself for an empty house until the brace dissolved. "If you want to stay," I said, "I would like that very much. And when you're ready to leave, we'll send you off properly. With the good tools and all the recipes and everything you need." He smiled, then grew serious. "Let's make Sunday dinners ours again. 6 o'clock? No phones at the table. We can invite people sometimes, but mostly it'll be us. And on rainy nights, we'll dance." "Deal," I said, and felt the house take a breath. After we cleaned up, Thomas carried the suitcase back to the hallway closet. He didn't tuck it away like something finished. He placed it where we could reach it again. On his way back, he paused at the wall where family photos hung in mismatched frames. He took one down, the three of us at a street festival, my husband's arm around my shoulders, Thomas mid-laugh with cotton candy stuck to his fingers. Thomas wiped his thumb across the glass, adjusted it slightly higher on the wall, and stepped back to check the alignment. Pride? That's what I saw on his face. And peace. We ended the night on the back porch. The rain had stopped, and the neighborhood smelled like wet earth and the faint sweetness of someone's dryer vent. Thomas fixed the porch light that had been flickering for months. I flipped the switch, and it glowed steady. You wouldn't think a light could change a house. You'd be wrong. As we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, he said quietly, "One more thing. Thank you for staying. For not selling this place and moving somewhere easier just because it would be simpler. for giving me a place to come back to when the world gets too loud. It's not bravery, I said. Sometimes it's just stubbornness. Sometimes stubbornness is love with work boots on, he answered, and I laughed. The kind of laugh that lifts weight and sets it down gently. Inside, I made us tea that we actually drank this time. He wandered to the bookshelf. Pick one, he said. Something Dad would have pretended to hate but secretly loved. I chose a thin paperback with a worn cover. A story about ordinary people surviving ordinary sorrows by doing ordinary things well, fixing, cooking, dancing, staying. He stretched out on the floor like a lanky teenager, one arm behind his head. I read until the words softened, until the day settled into the kind of memory you don't need to photograph, because you can feel exactly where you were whenever you think back to it. Before bed, Thomas stood, rinsed his cup, and came back to the kitchen. He rested a hand on the back of my chair, not quite ready to let the night end. Mom, he said, and I looked up. What I said earlier about being proud of you was true. But so is this, I like you. Not just because you're my mother. I like who you are. I want to know you better. If there's a sound a heart makes when it finally relaxes, I heard it. I reached for his hand. I like you too. And I'm looking forward to knowing the man you're becoming. He squeezed my fingers, gentle and certain, then let go and headed upstairs. Halfway down the hall, he turned back. Next Sunday, dinner? Your father would haunt us if we didn't, I said. Then it settled. When his door clicked softly shut, I sat alone for a minute. Not lonely, just alone. The radio was silent, but I could still feel the sway of our small steps and the press of his hand steady at my back. I looked around the kitchen, at the mismatched chairs that felt like ours now, at the photo hung slightly higher, at the faint ring on the table where my cold tea had sat. Small things. Excuses to work side by side. The house didn't feel big. It felt right-sized for two people learning each other again. I turned off the light, and as I climbed the stairs, I caught our reflections in the dark window. His taller, mine smaller, both moving in the same direction. There are nights that build a life the way careful hands build furniture, steady and slow, with strong joints. That was one of them. Upstairs, I opened my bedroom window and let the damp air carry in the smell of rain. I set the silver bracelet on my dresser where morning light would find it. I thought of the letter, of the instructions that were more blessing than manual, and of the way Thomas had looked when he asked me to. Dance, unexpected, chosen, deeply felt, safe. It's a particular grace to be chosen by the people you love after time has given them other options. Before I turned in, I made one small change. I took a note card from the drawer and placed it on the kitchen counter where I knew Thomas would see it when he came down for breakfast. In my handwriting, I wrote what I wished I'd said sooner and what I would keep saying now. Proud of you. Like you. See you Sunday at 6. In the kitchen below. The envelope lay on the table, folded along its careful lines, waiting for another quiet evening. The porch light burned without flickering. And somewhere in the dark, the house, our house, settled into itself with the contented creaks of wood that knows it's being lived in the way it was meant to be. Together.